Father, we just come before you, just give you praise for protecting the school system, dear Lord, looking after the students in this system, the staff, the parents, dear Lord. As we move through this meeting, we appreciate the provision you give Johnston County Public Schools to educate the children of this county, dear Lord, that they can be an impact in their life to this county and to this country, dear God. Bless the leaders that they have to make decisions, the business decisions of this board, dear Lord. I just ask that those decisions are pleasing in your eyes. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Go face the flag, join with me as we honor America with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Britt.
I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to Elvis in a minute and let him come forth. But Elvis is in the building, absolutely. We put together a PowerPoint for you. Thank you to Ms. Furr, Mr. Carr for their help with this. We couldn't have done it without him. Stephen and I come up with ideas and lay it out how we want to, but he nor I have the ability to make something this beautiful, and I want to thank them again for their help. You see here our overview, which is coordinated by page numbers, and those page numbers should be on your slides as well. You see the various categories that we're going to talk about today. Next slide, Stephen. Just if you just look with us at our priorities, and I won't talk very much, and Mr. Wooten, I invite you, Mr. Britt, if I say something inaccurate or you want to interject something, please do. Our priorities are employee compensation, sustaining our operations, and student wellness. When we talk about compensation, we want to be able to attract and recruit the best and the brightest to work with our students here in Johnston County Public Schools. And some specifics that you'll see a little later in this presentation is we are asking for an additional $1.7 million to go towards our teacher supplements. And Mr. Britt can sort of expound on that a little bit later if he so chooses, but we're asking for that to go toward our local supplements, asking for an increase in our minimum wage for classified employees. Stay right there for a second, Stephen. Our minimum wage, we want that to be a minimum of $16 per hour. Am I right about that, Mr. Britt? All right. And we're asking for additional funding to fund I think this is the last step, Mr. Wooten, of our salary compression. We want to make sure we get that as well. And that way, if we do that, our classified staff will be guaranteed to get an increase in salary each year that they work. That hadn't been the case in previous years. I believe that it was 54 steps before. So we're asking for that as well. And as everybody that watched us last night, we approved a very aggressive bus pay plan that we hope will make a difference as we recruit and try to fill all our vacant bus routes. Also in that, you'll see a little bit later, we're requesting a 2-grade pay increase for bookkeepers in certain categories. Asking for an increase as well for our principal supplement pot. We're asking for an additional $350,000 to go toward that pot as well. As far as sustaining operations, we still have charter school payments that we have to pay to our charter schools. Those costs go up the more the schools grow. Our utilities are increasing. Our liability insurance is increasing and going up as well. So we want to make sure we can sustain our operations. Student wellness, I think everybody in the school system will agree we had an amazing year this year. Fortunate enough to have a nurse in each school. It's just been great. It spoiled all of us. We want to make sure that we can maintain that. Dr. Pierce is not here. I should have asked him this when I just saw him a minute ago. That grant is expiring. And I'm not sure the date of expiration, but I know it expires, Stephen, before the next school year starts. So we would like to maintain this lifestyle of having a nurse in each school. I think I'm a believer that every child deserves access to a school nurse every day that they're in the building. I firmly believe that. And lastly, maintenance and facility repairs. So we've attached a capital outlay budget for you on pages 15, 16, and 17. It gives a detailed explanation of what we want to do from a capital perspective. I don't know if Mr. Carroll wants to say anything as chair of the bond committee about capital. If you want to say anything, feel free.
Well, basically, you know, over the years, we have historically dealt with capital needs through bond projects. And with our, you know, this past year, obviously, the county commissioners funded our security equipment at a substantial rate, and we also fund balance was appropriated into the capital. So, you know, and that enabled us to, you know, make a small dent in our capital projects. And there's so many, you know, people might not understand that, you know, there are capital projects that, you know, we can't use our current expense or fund balance to address. So without capital funding, there's just a lot of things that we're not able to address. Anything that improves or upgrades the building or improves that asset is a capital, and it can't come out of current expense. So we desperately need to continue funding our capital outlay so we can address the needs as we go along without postponing.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. We can go to our challenges. We could see. First challenge is planning for current and future growth. We are the fastest growing county in the state. That is a blessing, but it also brings about challenges. As everyone knows, we have 200, this is probably old information I got from Brooks a couple of months ago, 224 new subdivisions, 19,687 residential lots available, 186 mobile units. So there's a lot of moving parts when you're growing. It's better to be growing like we are growing and be. Stephen and I have been in a place that was not growing, and that brought about challenges as well as far as ADM reversions. Inflation, costs are rising all over the board. We've heard Mr. Moore talk about designing schools and the increased construction cost and materials for construction as well. That's the challenges as well. We're seeing major increase, not only in construction, but in fuel, cafeteria costs, just cheese and eggs and things like that that we don't think about, that we have to remember everything is going up. There's cleaning supplies, costs are going up as well. Stephen and I always talk about utility rates that are increased, water's going up, the light bill is going up. Pretty much every service that we're using as a school system is increasing. So inflation is a major challenge for this budget. What we think is going to cost this today may cost that a month or 2 months from here. I talked about compensation earlier, but I did want to commend the board from a compensation perspective for allocating and earmarking $7.4 million of their local fund balance for recruiting and retaining our quality staff. And the board has done that, and certainly I'm appreciative of it, and all of our employees are appreciative of that as well. Legislative impacts, the retirement rate is increasing again, Mr. Britt. Hospitalization rate is increasing again. The board has done a great job of going the extra mile. We talked about letters training last night. Ms. Rydell talked about that. But not only are the state doesn't compensate to the level that we compensate for letters. We pay extra, and I think that's another great thing that the board did, paid extra for teachers for the letters training that they're going through. Another legislative impact on us, we talked about this at the legislative breakfast, the EC cap, which is currently 13%. I think it was 12.5, then it went to 12.75, and now it sits at 13%. Had an EC budget shortfall last year of $8.4 million. That was down from $9.9 million in 2020. So that is a challenge. That is a challenge in itself, that sort of deficit that we're struggling with. So those are some of the budget challenges that we're facing as a school system, but we believe we put together a quality proposal that will help us on all levels. So next slide, Mr. Britt. Steve, you want to talk through our enrollment trends and projections, and I'll just remind everybody that that number on the left is all students in Johnston County, whether they be Johnston County Public Schools or our charter schools, and we differentiate on the graph. The blue part of the graph are our students, and the last graph there is our projection for 23-24. Mr. Britt, take it from here, please.
Dr. Bracy, one question before Mr. Britt takes over. The EC cap of 13%, in real numbers, that's around $10 million for us, correct, Mr. Britt?
Yes, we hit a high in 2020 of about 0.9.
Okay.
There's been several factors that's happened since that time that has helped us drop that down, like Dr. Bracy said, from the 10 million down to the 8.4 or so that we're at now.
It's a big number.
It's a huge number, yeah. And it
Several million that we're not.
right, yeah.
I have a bad habit of saying things like EC cap. Do you want to explain it? I'm sure Mr. Andrews and Mr. Tippett can explain it probably better than you and me.
Yeah, absolutely. So the EC cap, it means that, there's, the state imposes a cap on a number of students that are funded through, via EC funds or additional funds for exceptional children. And so, we can have enrollment growth, both with students that have IEPs or individualized education plans, trying not to use too many acronyms. You can have enrollment growth, but you don't necessarily have funding that goes along with it. I have an analogy that I've used about if you had a store and you had customers that come in and each customer is paying you a certain amount of money. Well, imagine that, you have a cap on the number of customers that can pay you, and every customer that you receive after that cap no longer pays you any money for anything that they come in and get from your store. And that's a bit what EC funding is. It means that as we get students to come into our school district, it means that we are capped at the number of students. So in other words, the federal government requires Johnston County Public Schools to provide the services, but there is no requirement there to provide funding for that service.
Thank you.
Yes. And speaking of enrollment and students coming into Johnston County Public Schools, so our current expense funding covers not just the students that are at Johnston County Public Schools, but it also covers students that are at charter schools. And so you have the American Leadership Academy and 30-something other charter schools that we are paying in our region that are funded a per pupil amount of our current expense funding. And so all the dollars that come in, as you see this budget request, not all of those dollars stay in Johnston County Public Schools. They are then turned around and dispersed out to all of our charter students. And so that's why you see both numbers here for our enrollment over the last several years. As you can see, we've added over 4,000 students for enrollment over since 2018. And that includes the blip that occurred during the COVID years, because we rebounded from that and then some. DPI is projecting us to have 37,811 students at Johnston County Public Schools next year, which is a 1,000 student growth, 1,000 student increase. I think that's a bit high. I think it's going to be a little bit less than that. But if you notice on there, we don't have any increase for charters, and charters are going to grow. And so I think between the two, the net, that 41.5 that's there is a pretty good projection for where we're going to end up next year. Because if you look at the year prior to that, we added about 1,000 students, and we're looking at adding about 1,000 again next year. So it follows the trend. There's a historical trend there. And so the funding, like I said, the funding we receive gets divided out per student, and then it gets allocated out to the charters from there.
Just for information, what is that amount that we send to charters? Do you have an estimate?
It's a little over $7 million is what we're.
7 million.
Yes, sir, is what we're tracking to pay out this year.
Paying it out monthly?
Yes, ma'am. We divided over, the state has us divided over a 9-month period. So all the charter schools send us their list of students every single month. That's what they call their PMR, or Principal's Monthly Report. And then we compare it to our Principal Monthly Report that gets submitted to DPI. Put those two numbers together, divide our monthly allocation from the county, because our funds that come to us come in a monthly allocation. So we just take that and then divvy it out to the schools.
Does Ms. Clark still verify those addresses for you?
It is Kim Young over in Tabitha Lee's shop there, and it's about half of her job is just to, she's our staff accountant. She wears lots of hats, but she spends about half of her time because she has to verify all 3,712 students. And by verify, I mean she has to check the address on every single one of those students.
And we're doing like how many, 30-some charters?
38 charter. That's right. So it's not just the ones, not just charter schools that are within Johnston County.
Virtual?
It could be virtual.
Sure.
They could. They're in Wake. They're in Wilson. They're all over around us. If they live in Johnston County, the money follows the child. That's how that works. And so, of course, we have Dr. Bracey's academic goal. We repeat at every budget session. By the end of the 23-24 school year, 100% of Johnston County Public Schools will earn a letter grade of A, B, or C. And Dr. Bracy, I don't know if you want to talk about the successes.
Just you'll see there, folks, our academic successes. I think that was from last year. Just a couple of highlights out here. In decrease in low performing schools, we started with 14, now we're down to 5. Surpassed North Carolina Performance Composite. We're ahead of the state in all those areas. Academic ranking, we've increased from 83 to 41 as well since we got back. We're already outperforming where we were before the pandemic occurred. Last year, 7 schools moved from a D to a F to a C. 33 schools exceeded growth, had 10 that exceeded growth in the 18-19 school year. Our graduation rate continues to climb. We're way above, I think that's significantly above the state right there, at 91 to 86. So just some things that we're proud of. And funding helps make things like this possible. I just want to reiterate that.
Yeah, so Dr. Bracy touched on our highlights of what is within this proposal before you today. So some of the key points is we do have a $16 per hour minimum pay. And so this would largely impact our school nutrition staff, our custodians, et cetera. Currently, the state has a $15 per hour minimum pay, and then we're requesting to exceed the state's minimum and move it up to $16 per hour for all staff. Currently, the state has I think it passed the House, and now it's within the Senate for a 4.25% state pay increase for this year. That's both on average for both certified and classified staff. In addition to what the state has proposed, we are asking for a $500 per teacher per year additional supplement increase. And so this is roughly about 1% of our average salary. So it's roughly equivalent to a 1% increase for teacher supplements. This is a little bit ahead of the game, but what we'll ask in a future month is that we look at teacher supplements kind of twofold. Currently, we're paying teacher supplements twice a year, which we're asking to continue and not change that part, but we'd like to add in and do a monthly supplement as well. And so we would pull in, we would divide this $500 by 10 months, so it'd be $50 per month for that part. There is a low wealth supplement that this year is coming out to about $1,000. I think it's $1,035. We would pay that monthly as well, so now we're up to $150 per month. Plus teachers this upcoming year, like Dr. Bracy mentioned earlier, the board has passed a $150 per month retention bonus that we would add to that. So you're looking at a $300 per month pay increase that would be for supplements and bonuses. So that would be in addition to what our teachers are receiving as supplements in November and June, as they've received for many years now.
Yeah, so supplements will be given out twice a year.
Yes.
The bonus is given out monthly.
The bonus would be monthly, and the request would be to add this supplement to that as well. Along with, instead of paying, right now we're paying the state's low wealth supplement in June because we don't always have that dollar amount at the beginning of the year. But it looks like we're going to get the budget from the state in time to be able to set up a monthly supplement for teachers for next year.
Plus the state's talking about not taxing bonuses, right? This being kicked around in the General Assembly.
That's one of those things, I'll believe it when I see it.
What is, you probably have it in here, if you do, just hold off and tell me, but what is the total cost of this $500 a year?
It's $1.7 million. Yeah, Mr. Wooten, a lot of people don't realize this, but school districts even pay sales tax, which is kind of odd. A lot of our colleges don't, and a lot of your state entities don't, but school districts do. That's why I'd be surprised if we
Can we recoup that though?
We only can recoup what we pay. That's the county portion. The state portion stays with the state. So it's fairly unique. Most states don't tax their school districts. But I digress.
Have you paid tax? That is way out of my wheelhouse.
They'll never talk to me again.
Yeah.
You're paying tax on money that is tax money.
Right, that's right.
Our economy.
Yeah, that's
I know,
right.
but, I mean, you get tax that is tax money.
I got taxed on my check and then I go buy something, I get taxed
You get
again.
taxed again.
Yep, that's right. We receive tax dollars and pay tax dollars back. So, yeah, that's right.
Florida does tax.
Right.
Yeah, but the property tax is crazy.
And for classified staff, as Dr. Bracy mentioned, we're requesting another 8-step salary compression, and this would be the last one. And this is the big one. This is the one that is driving a lot of our cost that's in this request. So that would get us down to 30 steps, and it really helps get us in a much more competitive place where we can compete with not only other school districts, but with general industry as well. So on average, for classified staff, so looking at custodians and your maintenance staff, et cetera, your garage. So on average, they would, with the 4.25% pay increase from the state, along with a compression, you're looking at an average around 7 to 8% pay increase for those employees. So some will be less, some will be more. It depends on where they fall on the pay scale, but on average, you're looking at a pretty healthy, a pretty strong pay increase. As Dr. Pierce mentioned last night, there was a new dual role bus driver pay plan, which we're really excited about implementing and seeing where that can take us. This budget also includes SROs at all schools. So part of our SRO budget is grant funded, and the remaining is picked up by the county. I don't know. I don't know if Dr. Pierce is.
Yeah, and that's with our municipalities kicking in. Okay, but the grant, we talked about this, the grant pays $36,000 for
Right.
an officer.
That's right.
So have you built into this budget the difference for the commissioners, because they've been willing to help us with
Yes.
this. So, okay.
Yes.
So they're gonna be able to see that here,
Yes, and that's built into the request.
because they've been very helpful and willing to help us with this, but they didn't know how much.
Yes, and you'll see a detailed slide that shows the county portion.
That was a state grant, correct?
Yes, that's right.
That runs out,
It runs out, but
I feel like.
I believe that might be extended again to us, possibly.
I think so.
But it's good that we don't rely on it.
Steve, I can't remember, the teacher supplement increase, that was for 1 year, right?
No, this will be reoccurring.
It's gonna be a contract.
Yes, sir.
What was it?
Yes, sir. The reason why we're looking at a flat dollar amount versus the percentage increase is to enable the board to be able to sustain it.
Right.
Yes, sir.
It's pretty much the set amount every year.
Yes, sir. So we should be able to continue that even after we go off the fiscal cliff when Esser goes away. So, and we also, as Dr. Bracy mentioned, we have a $7.4 million one-time recruiting and retention bonus for next year. This is paid entirely from fund balance, which you're going to see in a future slide. The $1.7 million in performance bonuses continued for DNF schools. This is continued over from this previous year. A 2 pay grade increase for bookkeepers. This would be primarily your school bookkeepers. So we are a bit behind, or a little bit more than a bit behind. We're pretty far behind market for what those positions pay. And so this would help get it up to more of a market condition or market comparable. I think we had one bookkeeper position that was vacant for a year before we were able to finally get someone hired and in place. So this would help us retain and fill for our vacancies. Finally, but not least, it would be there's a request for $350,000 to increase principal supplements. And if this is funded and approved by the board, the principal committee is working with Dr. Bracy and Mr. Vetrano on revamping what the principal supplement schedule looks like, and that would come back to the board once that team is ready to present.
And I think we're way behind on principals.
Compared, yeah.
How we compare to other counties.
We're favorable to small counties, but not to large counties.
And it has been a number of years since we have increased the principal supplement, is that right?
They're our last group. We've quite literally, with local funds, we've moved every single other person, teachers, assistant principals, classified staff, except principals. They're the only ones that we haven't in the last 3 years. So this will be our last group to get moved. This would average about $5,000 per principal when you factor in taxes, because that $350,000 also builds taxes and benefits into it as well.
Doesn't affect AP salaries.
No, sir. That's correct. Yeah. Just looking at, moving on to our vacancies, and this is what Dr. Bracey was talking about earlier with one of our major challenges, if not our single greatest challenge, is filling our positions. And this is the same all over, all over the nation. But you see some of our average vacancies that we've held throughout the year for teachers and at different grade levels. The HR team has put this together for us just to give you an idea of what we're working with. And now we're getting into to a bit of numbers here. This is not a new slide. You have seen this before. If it looks familiar, you saw this back in February when we did our kind of our mid-year update. But what this spreadsheet attempts to do is to calculate the cost, or more, maybe we should look at calculate the savings of how much we are saving by having the number of vacancies that we have. So as of December 31st this year, we had 374 positions posted on our website, and that's the breakdown of what those positions were and what the funding source was for them. And so the real question is, how much is it going to cost you to fill those positions? Because you can't use historical cost, because a lot of times those positions, when they were vacated by retirees. And a lot of times they're brought on by folks that are lower on the pay scale. So you can't really use historical cost to base it off of your future expectation of what you're going to pay. But it's also, you're not likely to hire all beginning and entry level staff. So you have to try to figure out, well, what's the true cost going to be? And that's where it gets really murky. Because as you can see here, we got a low, mid, and a high. Low is 0 years of experience on our salary scale. Mid is 5 years experience, and high is 10 years of experience. And so just from the difference between hiring entry level and 10-year experience employees is about a $3 million range of possible outcome. And so when we try to estimate, well, where are we at? Are we in a break-even point if we fill all our positions, or are we in the red, or where are we? Well, there's a lot of variations and a lot of possibilities that could come about when we fill those positions. So we're not saying that it's going to truly cost us $21 million to fill those positions, because even in a normal year, we don't have 100% employment. So in a normal year, we might have, right now we're at about 90% employment. So we've even though we're talking about 374 positions, we have over 4,000. So we've got 90-something% of our positions filled. And so in a normal year, we might have 98% filled.
I think if you can add to this chart at some point in time and rework it, that the amount, like it's TAs, we have 160 positions open, but if there's 3,500 total positions,
Yes.
it makes a difference to actually see that, especially to the public.
Yes.
So if you, moving forward, you could put the actual amount that are filled, that would be helpful to
Sure.
me and to other departments.
Yeah, sure can.
Can I interrupt before we go? I know we don't have many folks in the room with us, but we do have about 10, 15 people live streaming. For them to be able to hear you, will you continue to use your mics? Thank you. It doesn't feel natural with this few people. Thank you.
So the estimate, and this really is an estimate because we don't truly know how much our vacancy savings are truly saving us. So this is our best estimate of what to expect. It's about $14 million for our vacancy savings. But that's not the true cost, or it's not the true amount that we would actually save if all of those positions were filled, because there's some costs that are associated with having vacancies. Obviously, that would be temporary employees, overtime, planning period stipends, additional substitute teachers, et cetera. All of those have an increased cost, so we need to back that out of the $14 million. So when you factor all these things in, we most likely have a vacancy saving amount between $7.5 and $10.5 million. And you have to keep in mind that is a large amount of money, and it's a big variation, but our operating budget between our state, local, and federal dollars is over $375 million. And so as you're pointing out, Ms. Santon, it's a big number, but it's, we're not talking about we have 50% vacancies or anything like that. It's more like, less than 10% of our staff. But it still makes it tough to budget and estimate when you're trying to get it down to the dollar.
Yeah, it's always a moving target.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's-
So next question is, well, what would we look like in a normal year? So I don't know if we can imagine a normal year at this point, but in a normal year, so if we didn't have all the other things going on, if we didn't have Esser, if we didn't have bonuses that we were paying, if we didn't have the vacancies that we had, if we had normal levels of vacancies, what would we look at? What would we look like? Would we be in the red? Would we be to the good? How would we fall? So the most likely range that we would have if we had our current level of funding and a normal level of expenses is that we would be in the red. In other words, spending more than what we take in for revenue, somewhere between $2.5 and $5.5 million. Of course, that's not the environment that we're in because we have all the vacancies and we have Esser that is propping us up. And so that doesn't really worry me too much because that's not a huge amount of money to fix, So, and we'll talk about that in a minute of looking at as we look forward with our budget proposal, because we do have a very aggressive budget proposal here prepared for you. I'm not too concerned, but I do want to point that out that as we fill our positions, we're probably going to look at a much different financial environment than what we have now. So getting into the request finally, if you look at what we have received or are receiving for this current fiscal year, we have a $77 million current expense funding amount, $8 million capital funding amount for a total funding of $85.5 million for this current year. And then for our request for this upcoming year, we are requesting $88.4 million of current expense funding, $10 million of capital outlay for a total funding request of $98.4 million. This is about a $13 million funding increase, or about 15.1% total. And as you're going to see in a future slide, we're projecting our expenses to be larger than this again next year, and we'll break that down here in a little bit more. Any questions on this slide before I move to the details? So looking at the detailed slide, this is by program or by program area within our local funds. So you can see our program description name, our budget amount for this current year by program, and then what the projection and the need is for next year for 2024, and then whether that was an increase or a decrease. And so you'll see a little bit of both because we've gone through this budget line by line with all the departments. This has been the most in-depth and robust budget process I've ever had because there's just so many variables and so many pieces that are moving. It used to be when we built in inflation or we just did a broad 2% across the board. Inflation's going to be about 2%, so you just build that in. Well, now it's not. That's not quite that easy. Because we have some things that are, our inflation rate for certain parts, like in the bus garage and for construction, et cetera, and food is well above 6 or 7%. But then we have other costs that aren't moving anywhere. So like our copier cost, that's not increasing because we have a multi-year contract. And so we've gone through line by line with this budget with departments and schools, kind of forecasting what we need for this upcoming year. And so if there's any questions on the detail tab, I'll just hit some of the highlights and then feel free to.
Under local supplements, I know is this a 9.9 increase
Yes.
from last year? Is what it looks like?
So you've got two lines or two programs in there that's kind of our catch-all. You'll hear me talk a lot about, everything trickles down to local. And so when we do pay increases on the state side, that we'll run out of state money. So, for example, almost all of our employees are state funded. Not all, but most of our employees are state funded. And so now we're going to increase their pay. So we're talking about, we're compressing 38 to 30 steps. And so that is going to be entirely state funded with that amount. But we're not going to get new money from the state that's going to support that. And so
Right.
there's going to be a lot
They give a pay raise, but they don't give you everything that goes
Right,
with it.
that's right. And so we're going to have to make up for that in local. And so where we make up for that in local, we don't move people to be locally funded. We pick up the excess, or we pick up the leftover with local funds. And so we receive low wealth funds from the state that helps us offset that. So if you can think, to make it real simple, or as simple as I can, let's say we've got $100 currently that we're paying with state funds, and now we're going to give everybody a 10% pay increase, and so you've got $110, but you're not getting any new state money. Now you've got a $10 shortage. What I do is, and Tabitha and I, we go through and then we move $10 of expenses down to local. And so you have two primary catches here in the local budget that picks up that $10. The major one is your local supplement, because we are able to put some of our teachers' supplements in low wealth funding. So we'll fund some of that there.
So.
But that number includes the 7.5 retention bonus and all
Yes.
that. So
It
Right.
includes all of that.
So the I'm just trying to think of what's new. The 7.4 is new from
Yes,
last year.
That's right.
The 4.25% is new from last year.
That's right.
Now, the 1.7 million for DNF is probably less than last year's projection, wasn't
It's
it? 'Cause we
it's
got less
slightly less. I
schools.
think we had 1.8, 1.9, something
Oh, was
like
it?
that
Okay.
last year.
So it's
real
about the
close.
same.
It's
All
close.
right.
Mhm.
And then the 1.8 million EC in Esser.
Yes, and so that is Esser funds that were expiring on September of 2023. So we've taken we had to, there was
Right.
a restricted pot of money, so we took 1.8, and there's no supplanting
That's right.
clause
right.
in the with Esser funds. So we took $1.8 million worth of expenses, EC expenses, out of state funds and dropped it off into local funds. And that's
Okay.
one of the reasons why you don't see us spending the full $8 million worth of fund balance. That was our target amount for the board this year, because 1.8 million of that, we, like I said, everything trickles down to local. 1.8 million got transferred over to Esser.
Okay, that makes sense.
But yeah, there's two catch-all budgets. Local supplements, your PRC 831 there, about in the middle of the page, is your primary one. And then there's one up above it, insurance and benefits. That is where when we run out of money to pay folks with state funds, we start moving their matching benefit cost to local.
Now, the salary increases and the 8-step compression affect that greatly.
Yes, oh yes, there's a big part of that. And as we actually learned yesterday, because like we talked about, it's a moving target. I just learned this yesterday. Our property insurance is going up by just over $800,000 for next year. It's going up by more than $800,000 for next year. I only budgeted a $200 and something thousand increase. So that was a call I got at 8 o'clock last night on the way home from the board meeting. The insurance carrier thought it was important enough to call Henry, and Henry called me, and yeah, that was not a pleasant ride home after the board meeting.
Is that
last night.
pretty standard?
No, that's the most I've ever seen. It's almost
Why?
a 50%.
Why is it going up?
There's a whole lot of factors that go into that, and I was talking to Henry about this earlier. And he was, he had to dumb it down for me because I'm not an insurance person. But my understanding is that there's several components. One is property values are going up, and so replacement cost is going up. So our insurance for that is impacted. Some of the other factors are we're building more schools and we're adding more. That goes into it. Inflation is going into that for cost of insurance. And then I think there's something going on with, and as he was explaining to me, the reinsurance market. So what our insurer gets reinsured by other insurers, and that I heard, from what I understand, is tightening up. And so we are a big fish. We've got over $1 billion worth of property, and so we're paying $1.4 million of insurance on over $1 billion worth of property. And so when you have a small increase in some areas, it results in a big increase in your cost. So we are working on ways to mitigate that, looking at potentially increasing our deductibles. Since we have a good cash balance on hand, we could absorb more risk, but we're just barely starting to scratch the surface on that. Of how to alleviate some of that cost. But yes, so this is a moving target. It seems to be changing almost daily for us, and generally speaking, it's not moving in our favor most days. But yes, so that number is going to change by the time we get a final budget presented to the board in July. So
Are you gonna talk anything about inflation?
we
What,
can,
you actually, I'm sure you have that factored in here.
yes.
What percent, last year we used one number, what is the going percentage?
So we didn't use a standard inflation number this year across the board. We looked at it line by line. So we looked at, what that particular contract needed or what that particular line, what's been the trend for that particular cost. Like, for example, utilities is going up greater than the rate of inflation. Bus garage parts and tires and all that exceeded inflation. But then we have lots of other things that were less than inflation. And so that is kind of built in here. That's also why you'll see some negatives in here. In other words, we're reducing some of these local budgets, and that's not to be. Don't be alarmed when you see that. It's just like, for example, in the facilities line item, we had a $3-point-something million added to Brooks's budget this year, and for one-time needs. And so that was backed out for this upcoming year, but then we added back in inflation and utilities and wage increases and those sorts of things back into his budget. So that's where we netted out to be. We're also using Esser funds next year to pay for our next curriculum purchase. And so that's why you see a negative amount there in PRC 897. And that's one of the areas that will be a challenge for us to sustain after Esser goes away. And that'll be textbooks and curriculum for students. Any other questions on the details page before I move to the next?
You state at the end that the budget includes spending the fund balance. What do you mean by that?
Yes, thank you. I skipped right over that. So our total, if we had 100% employment next year, this is what I would project that we would spend, about $101 million. So if you look at the funding request is for $88 million. So it's a $13 million less than what the funding request is for. And I will skip ahead here and just jump to this slide to show you how that works. Because we are working on a fund balance spend down plan as well to try to get the two boards closer to what seemed to be the general consensus for our fund balance. So we...
Can you tell me who's working on that spend down? Who's working on that?
Like as far as the board members? Or
Mr. Britton, me.
This is the first I heard.
Mr. Britton and myself are working on this fund balance spend down plan that we'll present to the board.
When?
When what? What's the question?
When will you present that to the board?
When we finish this, you'll see a lot of it right here.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. This is part of the
Yes.
part of the presentation today. Will be.
I think the public should know, we just got that. I haven't seen this before. This is the first time we've had an opportunity to look at, so.
Yes. Yeah. That's part of our part of the presentation today that we'll jump to. But yes, you'll see that that here in a future slide. So now our capital request was a $10 million request, and now I'll turn it over to Mr. Moore here to talk through what some of the capital needs are for the school district.
Mr. Britt, real quick.
Yes.
What was the general consensus amount that was agreed upon?
You talking about fund balance?
Yes.
Depending on who you ask. If you ask Mr. Britton, me, you'll get a number. If you ask the county, they'll probably come up with another number.
Yeah. I didn't know if y'all talked and agreed to a number.
No, sir.
No.
No,
I think the county, the commissioners are wanting to be somewhere around 15 million. That is obviously, I mean, and there's there's benefits for keeping it higher and lower. It increases your bond rating with bonds coming up if the county has a higher one. So it could help the school system. Obviously, you want to keep as much in fund balance as you can. And obviously, the county has a whole lot of money in fund balance. But that's their, that helps when you do bonds. I mean, there's no way around it.
And our concern with the volatility of what next year will look like, it could swing one way or the other. As far as if we fill, it depends on how many positions we fill, is how much we'll have to hit our fund balance.
Yeah, that's the main thing
It
for
is.
us. It's always a
It
moving
is.
target, and we don't want to be.
We need a good buffer.
Yeah.
Well, the commissioners have stated that they would like to see us at 15 million. That's what I've heard from them. But they've also said they aren't going to leave us in a pinch. If they see that there's an $8 million shortfall and there was no fault of the schools whatsoever, they would absolutely come in and help us. So it's not like they're just going to leave us in a bad position.
The number he and I always talked about was 20, because we don't like to go to the commissioners to bail us out. We like to have our own buffer.
The thing is, we're not a taxing body, and they are, and we rely on them. And so building that relationship and kind of seeing where they're at, and they're promising us that they aren't going to leave us high and dry, we have to kind of, I think, navigate that carefully. We are also not a piggy bank. We don't hold on to people's money. It's their tax money, and if it isn't spent, it either needs to go to a fund that has a provision for it to be spent, or it needs to be given back to the people.
So your recommendation is what?
I would go along with the commissioners and say $15 million.
I'll make a recommendation to the board about that. The board can vote on it. We have a great relationship with the commissioners, and it's going to stay that way.
And one of the things that, the retreat the county commissioners had where, in their review, I think their fund balance is like as they said, $250 million. And their accounting firm essentially said that, right now what is keeping this county from attaining the highest bond rating you can get is the average income of the population in this county. And, no matter how much fund balance they keep, it is most likely not going to enable them to get to the highest mark. They're ones, as I understand it, they're one mark below the highest credit rating you can get. But until our county average salary increases, we're probably never going to, until that happens, we won't get rated that way by the bonding agencies.
We're good. Keep going.
All right, Mr. Moore?
All right, yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. To walk you through real quick of their prioritized capital budget. The first item, y'all have heard me talking about the ADA assessment that we've had. It stacks up about this high. I brought maybe last board meeting, but it was a district-wide assessment of every site, and it's quite substantial. And this is just outside access improvements. And just a little secondary fact: ADA was signed into law in 1990, so we aren't grandfathered. We aren't any building code grandfathered. It's a public law, so we should be in compliance by now, but this will get us there. The next item is, so the sewer at Court Holders Elementary is on a septic system, drain field that's been there since the 70s, which is well beyond the time frame for a septic drain field. There are sincere concerns of potential fines, and after reaching out to the county public utilities, I found out a design was done in 2012 to tie this into the pump station at Court Holders High School, but never constructed. So this is a request for those funds to construct that.
That's the same thing as a leach field.
Yes, sir. Like at your house. But elementary school with little kids, it's about 10 to 12,000 gallons a day. Much more than, yeah, absolutely. And the next few are just some more fleet improvements, transportation, passenger vans, technology vans, school nutrition and facilities. Just continuing to update that fleet that is
very outdated. So this is about our third phase of this. We've made a substantial dent in it, but this is to continue that effort. And then the last few items is I think it's our third phase of the playground replacements as well. You can see about 8 campuses. This is the not quite the final phase, but this is to get everything that's right there of concern or roped off or caution taped off and stuff's replaced. The next item is to add a second set of bleachers at 6 of our middle schools that do not have them on both sides, that just don't have the capacity for crowds. Plus, when you mix the Four Oaks crowd with the North Johnston crowd or the Princeton crowd with the Smith, it gets a little heated in there. So, and then some more classroom furniture to accommodate the growth, and also to replace cafeteria tables and other items like that. Last couple of items. So the last one is office space. We have folks in mobiles and closets and displaced apartments in the back of the warehouse, at facilities and different places, and also just the public access and the service that we provide. They often come here, but then there's we got the West Campus side, we got the facilities where enrollment's at, or school nutrition. So it's just kind of sending people all over to this office, and just create more of a one-stop shop for public access. And this is in excess of the request, so we are looking at contributing some Esser or some other funds maybe to bring it back down to that target of 10 million that we want to send over to the county for funding.
But now, this adds up to 12 million, even with taking out the 3.5 million. So is it a $10 million request or a $12.3 million?
Yes, it is a $10 million request, because we can move, some of the expenses are eligible for local, and some are potentially eligible for Esser. It's just what we need to do.
This is just the needs.
Just the needs.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
We talked in the finance committee, I think Terry mentioned it, about possibly using ESSER funds for playgrounds. Did we figure that out?
So my guy's due date is Friday to have the final list of assessment of all their playgrounds for you.
Sweet.
Yes, sir.
I'm not gonna talk too as much as I did last time on playgrounds, but I'm looking at $3 million for athletics now, and I'm an old coach, athletic director. And I said it before and I say it again, those playgrounds for elementary are the same as athletic fields and things for middle and high schools. And we need to, those elementary playgrounds need to be ready to go in August. I mean, I don't know what we need to do, but hopefully we can get Esser funds to do it. And if not, then we need to add that to the budget before it's presented to the commissioners, because I know we had a couple that were closed for most of the year. I mean, that's just my personal feeling that elementary schools deserve that, just like we have the playing fields and playing courts for middle and high school.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think this is a large ask for these commissioners. I mean, we just need to be real, and so maybe we prioritize. So maybe we say, hey, the second set of bleachers at the middle schools, maybe we find that the playgrounds are more important than them right now. We can come back to it.
What does the 470 cover? Does it cover all 8 of these playgrounds?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask,
Does this get us back where every playground is open and ready for kids to play on?
I can't answer that right now. I think so, but I said I want to find out what is left.
Right, because we need every playground to be on the list.
Exactly. Yeah.
Every playground that's not
Is
up to code or whatever, we need it to be on this list.
Is that what you expect to have by Friday?
Yes, sir.
And I think talking about the bleachers, I think the thing with the bleachers is this, it's more than for your athletic events. I know when we put those in the Riverwood, that was the only place we could get the entire school for an assembly. And that's the importance of having the extra set of bleachers. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but that's the big deal for some of our middle schools. They only have, because you can't get in the cafeteria with all those kids and parents, and you can't have an event, and the gym is the only place. And it is a big deal in middle schools for those bleachers.
Well, I've been to the middle school events during the sports seasons, and I'm telling you, it is people standing against the wall, standing in the doorways, the bleachers are full, and, there are folding chairs everywhere, so that needs to be addressed. Question, the construction playground replacement, is that something that could be done? Is that a current expense allocation, or is that a capital?
Capital.
Well, we were looking at Esser. There was potentially Esser funds for that, because I think there's some counties that have done Esser funds for,
I sent somebody.
and I mean, like I said, we talked about those little fitness things, fitness stations you have on fitness trails, and having educational stations on the playground, where there's learning centers on the playground. And I went to a playground somewhere, and they had their ABCs and stuff on their monkey bars and different things you could do. I mean, there's ways you can be innovative, and I mean, use the Esser funds we've got if we can do that and have learning type centers on your playgrounds. I mean,
I'm not real proficient in this, but now, I was thinking that the difference between a capital expenditure and a current expense, or let's say maintenance expenditure, was if you added the value to the building that you own. How does the playground equipment classify as adding value to the building?
So it depends on if it's adding value is one of the criteria. Extending the useful life of the building, greater than $5,000 of equipment is another threshold. So with capital outlay, there's things that are written in the state law for what has to be in capital outlay. There's things that are written in the state law that have to be current expense, and then you got a little bit of gray area between the two, because there's not a real definition for true capital outlay. And so, like, for example, computers. Computers can be equipment that is allowable in capital outlay, but it's also a classroom expense, which is allowable in current expense and is allowable in Esser.
Well, I would ask this question too, then furniture, why wouldn't classroom furniture be an allowable expense out of current expense?
It can be, yeah.
All right, I would argue with you that the playground, being ignorant but having read the state law about that, that I would believe that there's a good argument that it's not real gray.
Right, and so what we do when we have gray areas, we work with our attorneys and we work with our auditors and DPI on that to help us on that. So all three come together to answer our questions on that. Yeah. So and it really depends on.
Using the mic. Thank you for this opportunity. I think it depends on what we need and who we're arguing to, but I can help Mr. Britt if we need to make arguments.
Let's make all the arguments we can.
I'm glad to help.
Just need to make sure we have every school that needs one on there.
That's the plan.
I think that with the Esser funds, it's what the Esser plan allows for. It's not your decision and these are federal grants, so they're held to a much higher standard and they're more scrutinized, and they'll come back to you 5 times, and it's quite a process. So, and of course, it's not really about education with Esser, it's more about safety and air quality and different things like that. So if you can write the grant so it meets those standards, that's how you're gonna get it through. And hopefully, I trust that you can do that, so.
You're exactly right.
Well, one of the things that we need to look at when we request is the fact that $1 billion worth of facilities, is that what you're saying?
Over $1 billion.
Over $1 billion worth of facilities. And if we look at historically what we've been doing with our capital outlay is postponing it and putting it in a bond issue. Because we've gone from 2018, $1 million in capital outlay. Last 21-22 was 2.9 million. And this past budget year, granted, we put 8 million out of fund balance into capital outlay, and we got the 8,100,000 for our security equipment. So, you know, the county commissioners did fund outside of what was already in a school funding, $8.1 million. But the fact remains that we have spent, is it about $30 million of Esser funds
Yes, 28 million.
addressing these kinds of needs,
Right.
you know, by, you know, putting what Esser funds would pay for, and paying for that, and then using other funds to cover how we needed to exchange.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, I think the issue we face is, one, we're not gonna have the Esser funds to make up the lost ground. And we've done a good job, and I compliment both the school system and the county commissioners for what we've done. But the fact remains, you're not gonna sustain over $1 billion worth of facilities on a few $1 million a year. And you're not gonna catch up with a bond issue because of the growth. You're gonna have to have new classrooms, and what gets bumped to the back historically has always been our maintenance issues that we cannot do out of our current expense monies.
That's why I wanted to be on the bond committee and was denied that, because I wanted to work on you with a facility use, a capital outlay, so we can look at all these things. So, you know, you replace a boiler system, and that will last 30 to 50 years, maybe, depending, right? So
We make them last 30 to 50 years.
I mean, they do have a useful life, and we should know what each useful life of every element inside our capital, you know, what we have out there. And that was the whole point of me trying to work with you, but that just didn't happen. So,
I can
to
assure
the
you
credit
that
of,
we have worked hard with the county commissioners to cover everything that we could within what everybody is agreeing that they're gonna fund. Remember, we asked for
you just said that
and we got
this
172.
parse amount isn't going to be able to meet our maintenance needs too. The credit of Mr. Moore, he has started a version of what we had talked about doing, but, you know, how can we know what we don't know? So if we don't know exactly what our facility use needs are and what the capital outlook looks like for them and what boilers need to be replaced over the next 15 years, we can't put a budget together and present it with any sort of knowledge to the commissioners. That was what I was asking to do and was denied.
Has it been denied yet? I thought it was still in conversation.
I was denied access to the bond committee to work on it with you, that's all I
Bond
can say.
committee is
Yeah,
to
that
secure
has
the
nothing to do with the
2024
bond
bond.
committee.
That's what the bond committee
The
is
bond
for.
committee can
These
do
are-
a lot of things.
the bond committee is to promote, secure the 2024 bond. These issues that
We
we're
can
talking about.
educate, we cannot promote.
Okay. The situation that I think we're in is that what Mr. Carroll is saying, if I understand you correctly, is what we all agree, is that in the past, the maintenance needs of our school system we need to fund them regularly through our capital money or current expense, whatever we can use, and not have to wait till a bond to get things done that are fixing up our schools, unless it's really a large project. So that's, you know, and I think your comment about historically the capital money that we've received has not been enough. Now, last year was different. They gave us $8 million and then they withheld $8 million. But historically, we're not getting enough money to maintain our facilities through our capital monies. The bond is a separate thing. The bond is certainly for large projects, but it shouldn't be to paint schools and keep up schools and fix bathrooms and things like that. That needs to be our capital fund. And I think that's what Mr. Moore has been trying to work on. But, and I think you're aware of the things that we need. It's just, you know, prioritizing and getting the funding to do it.
But we have to know what we need to prioritize. That was the whole idea. And listen, they work together. Capital needs work together. There's big ones that we need a bond issue for, and there's small ones that we're taking care of every year. And that was the whole idea, is to put together something so we have a comprehensive list to take the commissioners and speak to them about it.
Now, Ms. Anton, your point is well taken that we do need an assessment of the whole system to see, all right, what equipment we have, what is the age, what is the life cycle, what is the cost to maintain it and replace it. And I hope that's not a dead conversation. And it is certainly one that does not need a bond committee to pursue. It needs this board to pursue, to come up with a plan to provide that information. And I agree with you, it would give us a good roadmap to know where we need to be and where we're going. I can also assure you that $10 million a year is not going to solve our capital needs. It will help us keep from maybe falling farther behind. But in this county with growth, it's going to be a combination of both for us to be able to keep our schools in good shape. And we've seen two issues recently at Clayton High School, and I think Cooper this morning, that we're in desperate need of capital funds to address problems.
And we agree. The thing is with committees, so the board does the overall work, but the committees do the small work. And so that's what the formation of committees is supposed to be about, where you do the small work. So that's not a project that we wanted to undertake and look at. That should be done in some sort of committee and brought to the board.
I think the point is that this board is still operating on a reactive plan. We're reacting to not having things done for decades, for not having a plan for decades. We're still in a reactive mode. We're trying to build schools to catch up. You're absolutely correct. By the time these schools are built, we're still going to be behind. And at some point, we've got to get to the proactive phase. And to your point, we can't do it with $10 million a year. To your point, we need to know what we need to do. I mean, it's both of you are correct. It's a matter of, in order to get to the proactive phase, we got to get out of this reactive thing. Because we're talking about Thanksgiving Elementary School is already needing additional space added to it. It's been open, 3 years? 2 years. Open 2 years, and we're already adding to Thanksgiving Elementary School. That's obviously reactive. So what I'm saying is until we, and I think it's a discussion that Mike is, or the Finance Committee, he's the chair of the committee, that discussion has to be had with the county commissioners, and I think it's being had. I know Lynn has talked, and you talked about the capital needs versus the construction needs, and I'm separating those two. But I think that's a conversation that's been happening, and I think the board needs to be involved in that, because at this point in time, I don't know. I mean, we've got a lot of work to do to get past this reactive stage.
And we have been reactive, but we have been making a turn on that because we haven't been doing PMs. Brooks, correct me if I'm wrong. We are implementing PM plans now, right? Yes, so we are making a change where we're becoming less reactive. That's right. So and we've got those PMs set based off of priority, or just on schedule.
Yes, and if I could add to your point, that's a great point, because if you've heard me the past year or two, when I bring items, oftentimes I'm saying they're well beyond their life. So we are reacting to an already established problem. So, and we are making huge strides to get from a reactive to where we can be on the end of life cycle. So I can be coming and saying, we have Buller XYZ that next year is at its end of life, and it's given us this issue this year. So we are recommending replacing it now before it fails. Whereas now, everything's well beyond its life. It's been duct taped and bandaged and held together with JB Weld and kick it real good. Oh, it's back going great.
Or MS-DOS.
Or amen. Yes. So the gut and if we did an assessment now, it would be a enormous sticker shock in year one.
I think the
because
last
there's so
assessment
much.
is over 10 years old. Yeah,
Right.
That's too long.
The last what?
Assessment that was done on the school system.
There
It's at
was
least-
one in 2016, and then when I took over this road, we did an in-house update to it, and it's just a substantial amount of well beyond life equipment, HVAC systems, everything, playgrounds. Let's get to a point that we can be proactive, and then let me give you and the county a funding model that's a proactive plan that year one is this.
Yeah, and from my discussion with the county commissioners, that's what they would like. They would like for us to come up with a 3-5 year plan what are your needs?
Yeah.
And that way they coming, we know what we're reaching out for. So from my discussion with them, that's what they like.
And
My
I-
whole point was, where are we doing it at? Where's this work being done? Because there's a lot of like miscommunication or something happening among us when we're not putting it in a box, whether it's bond or financial committee or wherever you want to put it, that we're putting it somewhere so we're actually accomplishing it. That's all I'm asking.
Well, I think we'll end up accomplishing this, and I think one of the issues we need to realize is that with all that we have going on in the construction side, the renovation side, replacement side, we need someone, our staff is not gonna be able to do what we need done in a timely manner to provide that information, so.
And that's what I've asked to be done. That's what we talked about.
Correct, and I will say, I don't think it's a dead issue, and what I'm hearing is that everybody thinks it's something that we need to do.
But I'm asking where it's going. What, are we gonna put it in a committee? Is finance gonna take it? Is bond gonna take it? Who's gonna take it and actually work on it?
I'll be glad to, as bond committee chairman, to talk with our chairman of the board and get this thing on the road.
I mean, it might be a separate committee that you form for that.
It's certainly not something that's difficult to achieve.
Or facilities committee. I mean, I think it needs to be a standalone committee. It's a big project.
It does need to happen.
But I'll go back to fund balance. That's why you need a fund balance, because we are reactive with our facilities, and with the ever-changing environment of our budget, we got to make sure we have a savings to absorb all of that. I've been through going back to the commissioners with my hand out. That doesn't go over very well.
Well, and the truth of the matter is, he's prepared us every time he talks to us about our budget, the fiscal cliff.
Yes.
The monies that we have had access to from the federal government under the Esser program has enabled us to do a lot of things. But, that's coming to an end, and we bought a lot of good stuff that may need to be, computers is what I'm thinking of here, that we've spent a bunch of money providing computers that we're gonna have to pick up locally. So we do need to have some cushion to be able to deal with that shock.
And not to sound like Chicken Little, with the sky is falling, but, it is potential. When we talk about a fiscal cliff, it really could be more like a perfect storm brewing, because you could be in an environment where Esser goes away at the same time that inflation is still high, at the same time that recession hits, exactly. And that when a recession hits and then unemployment climbs, we're more likely to be able to fill all our positions. We fill all our positions, now there's all our savings, exactly.
And your fund balance.
And fund balance. And so that's what makes me worry with depleting fund balance, beyond a certain point, because it would be nothing for us to spend $8 to $10 million of fund balance in 1 year. I know that sounds like an amazing amount of money, but you think about, like I said, we have a $375 million regular operating budget, not including capital, not including bond, not including Esser, et cetera, just to keep the school district running. It's not a whole lot of money relative to the whole. And that's what worries me a little bit, because we just don't have much wiggle room when you start depleting down to a smaller amount of fund balance.
Well, I think the issue with the commissioners was that they want to know, like, we see that there's an insurance issue of $3 million, that we don't just pay it down and don't talk to them, that you go to them and say, look, we gave you your budget, you passed it, thank you very much. We have a $3 million insurance issue, and we're going to need your support on making sure that the fund balance is supported by that. I think it's about building the trust with the commissioners, and frankly, there was a time not that long ago where that trust was not there. I believe that you and Dr. Bracy have rebuilt that trust, and I think we should work towards, kind of working with them.
And of course, everybody has an opinion on fund balance. I'll give mine as your bean counter, standing before you. What I would prefer would be a percentage-based fund balance. So if you look on the slide here now, you'll see kind of the fall and rise of fund balance over the years. My recommendation would be to make your fund balance target a percentage of the current expense allocation. And the reason why I say that is because when we are growing so rapidly as a school district, $15 million, so let's say that's the target that you want to get at, or that between the two boards, if that's where we end up, that amount of money covers less and less and less as time progresses. And so it's less and less of an insurance policy, whereas a percentage will grow with our student enrollment. Yes, yes. So,
And I think that the key thing for this is that 19 million, projected, is anywhere from 19 million max to potentially 13 million.
that's correct.
Based on I don't think every vacancy is going to be filled, but if every vacancy was filled, then the fund balance would be 13 million.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
You're absolutely right.
Because
Yeah.
you're paying out twice. You're paying a signing bonus to come on and to work with us, and then you lose the vacancy savings. So
Yes.
it's taken off of both ends.
And I think the commissioners understand that.
Yes, I do.
On this. We've talked about that. It's kind of you want every position filled, but in the event every position is filled, we're looking at decreasing our fund balance by another $6 million. So I think that's understood with this group of commissioners, and I agree. I've been here a long time. I don't want to make any commissioner board mad, but I've not seen the cooperation between these two boards the way it is right now. So I feel good about the support we got.
And then what happens to vacancy savings is it goes right back into our schools
Right.
for repairs that should have been done 5 or 6 years ago, so.
So yeah, just tying it all together with looking at our current expense request and fund balance. So we began this current fiscal year with a $31.3 million fund balance. We have planned to spend $8 million, and of course, as I talked about earlier, we had transfer some expenses to Esser to spend that down. We're trending to end somewhere around $26 to $25 million worth of fund balance, somewhere in that range. And then looking at next year's request, we have an $88 million request. It's kind of like buying a car where you got a line here. This is how much this costs. This is how much. So I feel a little bit like a car finance guy right now. But you start with your $88 million request. If we had full employment, I'm projecting that we would have an expenditures of around $101 million of current expense, which would normally be a $13 million deficit. But if we build in a $6 million anticipated vacancy savings into that, which would reduce our actual expenditure for next year, that would leave us at roughly $7.4 million, which is the dollar amount that the board has committed to for the one-time bonuses. So it would mean that we would knock fund balance down to around $19 million next year. But of course, this is a moving number, a moving target. So will vacancy savings be $9 million again next year like it was this year? Will it decrease? Will we be able to fill our positions? I don't know. I don't think any of us know how that'll turn out. But we're trying to do the most realistic projection that we can. But yes, Mr. Tippett, to your point, if we filled all the positions, it would be down to $13 million. And quite honestly, my recommendation to Dr. Basie, if I see that we are spending fund balance down that quick, would be to maybe hit the pause button on filling all those positions, find an equilibrium point, wherever that may be next year. I hope we are able to get to that. I would love to see that, see that we're able to fill positions. It wouldn't be a permanent pause. It would just be get us through to the next budget request.
And I think to add to that is the aggressive plan that Dr. Pierce presented for that part for next year. So I think we need some leeway with that plan being put in place.
And while we're in a good financial place, it is still a really difficult place for the board to be in because there's a lot of unknown. And if you don't move aggressively towards trying to keep up with the market with pay, we're never going to fill the position. So it won't matter. None of the rest of what we do matters if we don't have our classrooms filled with teachers and TAs and that sense. So it's a challenge all the way around with keeping up with capital needs and then weighing that against the needs of keeping staff. So on a more positive note, to try to not speak totally negative, we are 14th in the state for average teacher supplemental pay. And all of these statistics that I'm reading you now is not my numbers. This is from DPI statistical profile. So if you Google DPI statistical profile, you can see all these things that I've got pulled up here. And I have the tables listed where they come from. So we are in the top 10% of the state for teacher supplements, which means we're in the top 10% for teacher pay. in local per pupil appropriations, we're still in the top 50%, or actually top 40% of the state for county appropriations that come in for our local funding. We're 103rd in the state, so we're right near the bottom for our state funding per pupil, and that does include low wealth funding. And then we are at the bottom, right next to the bottom. There's one school district that spends less per child than Johnston County Public Schools, and that's Lincoln County Public Schools. It's definitely not a place that we want to be, but we spend about $1,600 per student less than the state average. So you're looking at tens of millions of dollars less here than what the average school district in North Carolina is funded at and is able to spend. So we're looking into why are we ranked towards the bottom? There's a whole lot that goes into that. There's a lot of formulas at the state, but it basically comes down to, if you look at the funding across the state, there's several factors that go into it. The size of the district, economies of scale come into play. Smaller districts are typically more expensive and receive more funding than larger districts do. But there's also other factors that go into that, and it's the wealth of the district. And so if you are in a more poverty, or in a district that has higher levels of poverty, you receive a lot more state funding and federal funding. So if you look at our funding across the state, it's kind of like a U, not a perfect U, but a little bit like a U. Where if you have higher poverty, you're on the higher end of the scale for funding. But if you're on the wealthier side of the scale, you're like Dare County and Chapel Hill, Carborough, et cetera, you receive a whole lot of local funding on there. And so you also receive a fair amount of funding. But you have a kind of a cohort of districts or counties that are at the bottom of that U, the bottom of the funding. And that would be districts that are neither particularly wealthy nor are they particularly poor. It doesn't mean that you don't have poverty. It doesn't mean that you don't have wealth. It just means that on average, the district doesn't really hit either one of those two marks. And that's counties like Johnston, Union, Lincoln, Gaston, Iredell, Statesville, that area. We're all about the same, where we're kind of neither particularly wealthy nor are we particularly poor. And the way the funding models work out, we are at the bottom of the funding barrel. So that's why we rank.
And it's because it's like we're two separate counties almost.
Yes.
We can split our county into a more wealthy area and a more lower wealth area. I mean, that's the way our county is, and that formula hurts us, and unless that formula changes, it's gonna stay there. We're gonna stay near the bottom.
Yes.
On that particular one, unless that formula changes in Raleigh.
That's right. Mm-hmm. So a couple of looking at some charts there. This is the chart that comes up when you pull up the statistical profile, and it just shows Johnston County Public Schools and what our average supplement is. This combines what we pay for local supplements, plus we receive, like I said, that $1,000 per teacher state low wealth supplement there, and so it puts us at 14th in the state for that. 46th in the state, and you can see all the counties that are around us for local per pupil allocations. And then looking at our per pupil expenditures, I have it sorted where we're at the top, but we're really at the bottom because it's from the bottom down. And I've also have the state average placed in there as well. So you can see how much less that we spend relative to the rest of the state. But if you look at all the counties around us or around us on the sheet, it's those that are in that U that I was talking about. Just a quick update and reminder about Esser funds. So there were 3 tiers or 3 allocations of Esser funds from the government. The first was known as CARES Act. The second was known as the Esser, or you can see the different names that it's had up there. That we call it Esser 2. And then you have finally had the American Rescue Plan, and that was the largest of the 3. And then when the dates were, those were allocated. And so looking at our timeline of our expenditures for Esser, so we have the time for our CARES Act money has passed. We have fully spent that amount of money. We're rapidly approaching the deadline for our Esser 2, and we are mostly spent with that pot of money. And then Esser 3, there is a lot of construction that's in that, and so that will, as we pay our invoices for the construction component, that will whittle that away as well. But we're on target to fully spend our Esser funds. So there are small pots of money that we are having challenges to spend, because they're very highly restricted. You'll see in our monthly budget update that we have all the little pots of money that come in from Esser, and they're very specific as to the use. And they're not particularly large compared to the big number, but there are some funds that unless the state relaxes some of the restrictions on those funds, we currently don't see a way to fully spend. I make somewhat of a joke, but it's not really a joke. It's kind of a sad joke that the state seemed to put a lot of restrictions on Esser. It's almost like, you can only buy purple socks on Tuesdays when it's sunny outside. That's kind of like how it feels like when we're jumping through all the hoops to spend down some of these funds.
You said that we're not going to spend it all. You're talking about Esser 2 or Esser 3?
Esser 3. Yep, Esser 2 looks good as far as spending it down. And it won't be a tremendous amount of money, but it will be some. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Great segue is in this screen that we have now. Yep. So the big components of Esser 3 is we have to the federal government restricts to be able to spend, or restricts us to only apply 20% of our Esser 3 money towards learning loss, or excuse me, that's the minimum that we apply towards learning loss. The rest is at the board's discretion with approval from DPI. And so those are major points or major expenses that we have remaining to be spent. Tutoring and it's Saturday academies. We have a big curriculum purchase coming up next year. We're continuing our summer learning programs like Summer Bridge and the CT summer programs. $28 million for construction. And we also have the one-to-one student devices. Also, we have in there, if you remember, we had the supplementing Title I funds for this year for that transition for a lot of our schools to add the extra Title I schools. And the ones that lost money, we're making up for it with Esser funds this year.
I think that learning loss thing was what we talked about for the playground stuff. Potentially using that, because I think some county had used learning loss and having things on the playground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, outdoor classroom type things.
Right, yeah. Yeah, all of that we submit to DPI as part of our plan, and if they approve it, then we're happy. Yeah. And that concludes the presentation that we have for our very, very in-depth budget proposal. Any questions or comments, anything that the board has? I love to talk budgets. I can do this all day. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you bringing this to us. It's been a lot of work. I know you start with each department, and they turn it into you and Dr. Bracy weed through it. There's a lot in this budget, and I think it's a job well done. I appreciate your efforts on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate it, Stephen. One of the big things that the commissioners have said that they pride themselves on is fully funding the school system, so I'm curious to see what they're willing to do.
Yes, sir.
I have a question on the spend down. So we're looking at projected ending fund balance of this year of $26,445,000.
Yes.
And we walk in there with the budget asking for $100 million. They're going to say, you have $26 million. We want to see you at $15 million. Come back when you have $15 million, or we're going to take it off your thing.
I don't think that's a wise spend down. We can't spend it just to spend it. I think that would be frivolous and not wise. We can get it down to 15 right now. All we would have to do is put it into bonuses. And you know what people would do with those bonuses? Some of them wouldn't come back to the district. I like our plan to give it to them next year, give it to them monthly. I think that protects the school system that way. And we reward our employees who come back next year as well. We pay the recruitment/retention bonus monthly. So at the end of next year, we'll be down to 19 at the end of the 24 school year, maybe even lower.
Possibly, we don't know that. Again, we're
All
projecting, it's all
projections.
projecting.
That's all we can do is project.
We could get it down to $15 million if we approve the Clayton bond project that didn't move through too. Because it's $8 million
It's a board
lift.
decision.
And we get it down to closer to what the commissioners want to see. And then I don't think they have a lot of argument in terms of what you've supplied us to fully fund these schools. I think walking in there, with what they want to see for numbers is going to only be helpful. And I'd like the fine arts supported at Clayton High School.
Yes, ma'am. I'll make comments on something after you do your action item.
Yeah, this is an action item, so I need a motion to approve this budget.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Wooten and a second by Mr. Carroll. Now, any discussion? Any further discussion?
I'd like to take $8 million out and put it towards the building of the Fine Arts Center over at the Clayton High School. That would get us down to a projected fund balance that the commissioners would like to see. And then I have absolutely no problems with this budget.
We've had, I think there are ongoing conversations with the county commissioners about handling the Clayton issue, and it's not 8 million, it's 11 point, help me, Brooks, 11.4?
It's about 11.6.
All right, it's 11.6 project, so I think we need to continue working through the process of trying to find out how to deal with the 2018 bond. So
The $11 million is for multiple projects, not just Clayton High School, is that correct?
Correct.
How much would it take to finish the Clayton auditorium for fine arts?
I would have to verify, but that is the only remaining project on the 18 bond. That's not under contract.
I thought there were other projects that were put into that $11 million
There were-
that created the shortfall.
there were other projects that, yes, went over, but I think they've already been bid and awarded, is that correct?
Awarded.
The only one left is the Clayton Auditorium that came in at 11.6. It's not been awarded, and the money from that bond has been exhausted, so we've got the whole amount that we have to work on how we cover it.
Right, if you took $11 million off $26 million, that puts you right at $15 million.
But I'm not sure we have that money in fund balance to do what we've already committed ourselves to do.
That's correct, because the bonuses, if you paid them out at one time, would bring you down to, yeah.
I would say let's let this process work through to try to deal with the shortfall of 2018 bond. And
I don't know what that process is. I don't know who's speaking to me. What committee? Finance? It's been moved around, it's been shuffled around. We had a meeting. There's no real communication about it, so I have no idea what's happening, even though it's my supervisor's, that's my school I oversee.
well, I would say when there's something to communicate, that we'll probably hear from finance about the communication, so let the committees do their work and work with the county commissioners.
I'm not
and
part of
go
the
from there.
committees, generally speaking. I'm on one committee, and I'm not even included in half
I
of
know
that.
no
So
more
it's
about that
difficult for
committee
me
work
to
than you do,
understand and
Ms.
see what's
Anton.
happening. And all I can do is advocate from the position I'm given, which is right here today.
But we're all
And that's what I'm doing.
advocating to get Clayton their project, I can assure you.
Mr. Carroll? You stood in front of a whole bunch of people and promised them a lot of money.
I certainly did, and we're trying to work our best to accomplish what we need to do for that community. Let's let the process work.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call for a vote to approve the budget as it has been presented to us by Mr. Britt. All those in favor, would you please indicate by saying aye? Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, it's a 5-1, yeah. Okay, any other, did you have something else?
No, Madam Chair, I just wanted everybody to know Mr. Carroll fussed at me last night and said he wanted all material on his device. He did not bring his device today. So it is on e-board. People still love paper.
Mr. Britt, I have to say that me voting not for this budget has nothing to do with your numbers and what you've presented, and you've done a
Understood.
fine job, and I appreciate all your work.
Appreciate that. And I just want to take a moment to thank Ms. Tabitha Lee. She's
Yes,
always
I was
behind
gonna
the
say the very
scenes.
same thing.
She's always behind me back there.
Thank you for,
I
And-
couldn't
being
do it
here and
without
all
her.
your hard work.
The only people who looked at the materials on their device was Miss Furr, Tabitha, Miss Cornetto, and me.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Adjourn, motion by Mr. Wooten, a second by, who, oh, Mr. Donovan? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear, so I was looking this way. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Thank you.